Good afternoon. I'm Victoria Fernandez, Teen Services Librarian at the Iowa City Public Library, and I'm thrilled to introduce our visiting author, Samira Ahmed. The Visiting Author Program is co-sponsored by the Iowa City Community School District Foundation and Hills Bank. A huge thank you to them for making this author visit possible. Samira is a former teacher, now author, presenter, and has written best-selling works including Love, Hate, and Other Filters, Internment, Hollow Fires, This Book Won't Burn, the Amira and Hamza duology, and Miss Marvel, Beyond the Limit. So many. I had not realized. Clearly invested in the magic of words, she says, every child deserves to see themselves as a hero on the page. So true.
Totally true.
Welcome, Samira.
Thanks so much, Victoria.
Yay.
I appreciate you having me.
Yes, we are thrilled to pick your brain a little bit today.
Please do. I can't wait.
Absolutely. All right, so my first question. As a former high school teacher and, of course, YA author, it's clear that you, like me, hold a special place in your heart for middle and high school humans. You've described them as existing in a liminal space. What is it about this age group that resonates with you on such a deep level and allows you to write so authentically for them?
So I was a high school teacher, so I love teens. I think it's such an interesting time in life, and that liminal space is like that area between like childhood and adulthood. And I refer to it sometimes as what I call the realm of possibility, and that's kind of the space in which I write my works, because I think of books for young adults as stories where doors are opening, and I think of like middle-aged literature more as stories where doors are closing, just because as you're aging, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but for young people, I think it's just so interesting because I imagine it like this space where there's all these doors, and kids can open those doors. Sometimes, you know, they're going to open a door and they're going to be like, yes, this is like the perfect path for me to walk down, and they're going to like zoom down that path. Other times there's going to be doors which are hard for them to open. Maybe they need to have their friends help them open it. Maybe they're taking a sledgehammer to it because somebody is trying to prevent them from opening that. Maybe there's other doors they open and they're like, oh my God, I do not want to go down that path. So I just like that this is a space where they can experience different things, where they can try different things. And I think that space is such an interesting space to write into. I mean, in teen life, there's natural drama. Every time I talk to teenagers, I'm like, okay, who argues with their parents? And it's everybody. And you know, you have this moment where there's expectations that are put on you from, you know, society or your parents or like other adults in your life or even some of your friends. And maybe those expectations aren't the ones that you have for yourself. Maybe your dreams are different. And it's you know, young people are finding their voices and finding their space and, you know, finding their politics too. I remember a young person said that to me, and they were a senior in high school, and he said, you know, I'm just like finding my politics now. And I was like, that is such an interesting way to phrase it, because he didn't just mean politics as in like, I'm this party or that party. He meant like a worldview. Yeah. And I love to be able to write into this space where young people are forming their worldview.
Sure. I love that too. I mean, oftentimes, especially if you're from a small community, and you can find a friend that you might not have in a classroom. So I really appreciate you putting stories out into the world and having people be able to connect with them on a really deep level. So you've said in the past that you've wanted to write for characters that previously had not existed for you. How have young Muslims and marginalized youth in particular responded to your books?
So just today, I was at a school and I met a young woman, and I think I can say her name because it's not her last name. Her name's Asma, and she came up to me and said, you have a character in one of your books that has the same name as me. And that was so exciting to see, because my name is kind of unique and I never have seen it in a book before. And that's just a tiny interaction, but she was just so excited by that. And it's just a small way in which she can be seen in that book. And I said to her, yeah, I was that kid, because my name's Samira. I would always look for it on like, you know, like keychains and like the coffee mugs, and it was never there. And so now for you know, a student like her to be able to say, that was cool that I got to see that. It's so nice to be able to give a young person just that tiny little space where they feel seen. And you know, in like sort of larger ways, like with Internment, for example. Internment can be a very scary story. It's about it's like a near future speculative novel where an authoritarian is elected to power, is diminishing civil rights of Americans, and starts putting Muslims into internment camps, similar to what happened to Japanese Americans in, during World War II in America. And this was in Texas. A young woman came up to me, and I was in a signing line, and she was with two friends, and they literally like pushed her up to come and see me. She was like really shy and so nervous, and she was actually a freshman in college. And she said, I was really scared to read this book because I'm Muslim, and those are the fears that I'm having right now in this current political environment. That book came out in 2019. And she said, but I made myself read it anyway, and you took my fears and put them on the page, but also put hope there. And so that gave me a sense of hope. And I think, I mean, for any writer, if a reader, if a young person can come up to you and say, I read your book and I was scared because it represented some of my fears, but you gave me a little bit of hope. I mean, gosh, what more can you ask for? Right. That's pretty amazing. So
Right.
I've been very fortunate to have some of those experiences, and that's why I feel so lucky to be able to meet readers. It's one of my favorite parts about being an author.
Yeah.
And I also love when kids, I spoke at another school, and I spoke to this young woman who was an immigrant. She's Russian. And she came up to me and said, okay, well, I'm an immigrant, but I'm not Indian and I'm not Muslim, but I really liked how the parents were so important to, the main character in the story. And even though she had like disagreements with them, she kind of understood their point of view, but also she wanted to still be her own person. And she's like, I totally get that because my immigrant parents have the same thing.
Yeah.
So she's like, I'm not like any of these characters, but I also sort of am.
Yeah. I think your book, especially Internment, speaks to that intersectionality of humanity. We were able to empathize regardless of whether we identify with that particular
Yeah, I hope
group.
so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really important. That's part of the reason stories exist.
Right, exactly. So this is a slight pivot from your books. I've read in other interviews that you're always on the search for the perfect mango and pastry.
Yeah.
Where have you eaten the best mango, and what's your favorite pastry and why?
So I always say for both of those things, yes. Like I lived in Kauai for a year, one of the most beautiful islands in the world, I think, and I am obsessed with mangoes.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because I'm Indian, but mango season in India is amazing. So
Yeah.
if anyone can go to mango season in India, please do, because there's all different kinds of varieties of mangoes there that you might not get here.
Yeah.
But I always like to say that like the perfect mango was from the mango tree in my backyard. Because sometimes you're searching for something and it's so much closer to home than you realize. And it was literally a mango tree in my backyard.
Oh, wow.
Okay, pastries. Whew, I could do like a whole 1 hour show on pastries. I guess like just like the mangoes, it's sort of like about the quest, because like what amazing quest to decide like I am just going to try every pastry that I can come across in the world. And I am lucky that I have some family in France, so I get to go there virtually every year. And I got to say, French pastries are amazing. One of my favorite pastries that I ever had is, let me stop. I'm going to go back. The pastry that I first had in France, and this was in 1994, a long time ago, that kind of put me onto like the pastry quest, was a religieuse. And a religieuse is, it's like two choux, like sort of one fat one and one on top, filled with some kind of cream. Like it could be a strawberry, it could be chocolate, coffee. And when I ate my first one that I had in Paris at this small store, a small bakery in the Marais, I was like, this is like the greatest thing on earth. And so that kind of started me on this like, I don't know, I mean like it's kind of joking that I'm on the quest for the perfect pastry.
Right.
No perfect pastry probably exists, but I have had also in a small bakery in the Marais, this pastry that was a saffron cream pastry. And I was like, this is, I don't know who the chef is, but I am in love with that. I mean, pastry is high art, if you ask me. So
Well done pastry for sure.
I love pastries,
My dad is from India too, so the mango thing was like, I was wondering, I was hoping, but I was like, she has to say India because.
Well, the thing is, yes, okay, so like everyone talks about Alfonso mangoes, which are amazing mangoes, and you can occasionally get them here in the US, but they're They're plucked before they're ripe, so they're just not as
Yeah.
good. But there's another kind of mango, and I don't know what the English word for it is. In Urdu, we call it chusne-ke-aam, which is like, literally means the mango that you suck. And it's like this mango, and what you do is like, you like squeeze it and roll it around so it gets super pulpy, and then you like put a little hole on the top and you just suck it out. And I the first time experienced that when I was a kid, and we were visiting family in Hyderabad, and it was amazing. Like, I'm literally just sucking on all these mangoes, the juice is dripping down your hands, but you don't care because it was also just a fun experience, because I'm having this with all my cousins, and they're so excited because like their American cousin is getting to try this mango for the first time. And I just remember how sweet it tasted, and I don't know, sometimes our experiences with food are really about not just the food, but also the people that are around us.
Yeah.
And them getting to share this experience with me
Yeah.
for the first time, and it's something that I'm always going to remember.
Yeah.
I mean, food are like stories, right? It's the way we
sure.
like connect to each other.
Yeah.
I actually love food, which you can probably tell. 'Cause
Yeah.
You could just continue to ask me
Yeah,
questions.
I mean,
about
I do
food.
too. When there was another article that talked about, ginger and turmeric and onions, and
Yeah.
that was just, those were like the holy trilogy, the
Yeah, I
holy
know,
trinity
right?
in my house. It was like that was like the base for all the curries and things that
Yeah.
we had. And the potpourri, my mom would, it just used to be a thing that people had in their house, which
It
I
was
don't
like a
think
total
they
thing.
do anymore.
I know, but it was like such a weird thing, because like my sisters and I joke about it, because like our house always smelled like this ginger garlic onion smell, but then there was also like random bits of potpourri. Like, I guess people use candles now instead.
I guess so, yeah. Odd thing.
Well, it's
Okay,
like the smells of childhood. You kind of always remember it, right?
for sure.
Smells are like
Yeah.
the closest association to memory, which is why I write about smells so much in my books.
Yeah. I miss some of those smells.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to make a curry. That's a
Yeah,
reminder.
I know. Now I'm getting hungry.
Yeah.
All right, we have to go to dinner after this.
Okay. All right, back to your books. So in your book, Internment, I think you do a fantastic job of what resistance looks like as a teen and as a more cautious parent. So the main character, high school student Layla, is emblazoned in her resistance and often lacks foresight, sometimes a shortcoming of youth. And her parents, who hold fairly similar views to her, are often complicit in their silence to protect their child, sometimes a shortcoming of adults.
Yeah.
Has your view of advocacy shifted as you've grown older, and if so, in what ways?
So I wrote that because I think there's always a natural tension between parents and children, right? Like, even the concept of parenting is essentially saying to this child, I love you, and I'm going to give you every single, I hope, thing that you need to be successfully independent from me, okay? I want you to be able to live without me. But at the same time, like, as your kid is growing and they're becoming more and more independent, there's this natural parental inclination to be like, no, you're still a baby, come back. And that's where that natural tension is between parents and children.
Right.
So in this case of internment, it's like to the extreme, because they're under like an authoritarian rule, and Layla's like, wait, we've got to fight back. And I learned to fight back because of you.
Right.
You guys told me, like, we shouldn't accept injustice and we should fight for people. And the parents are sort of like, okay, but we don't want our kid to get hurt.
Right.
And so I think, for me, I completely understand the desire to protect your children. But I feel like I was always a kid who, like, when I was young, I was a fan of protesting in college. I've been in so many protests. And I still think that's really important. And I think there's lots of different ways that we can advocate, but I think parents being silent is so problematic, because one of my characters says this, and I can't remember if it is I think it's in Internment, where Layla says, they can kill us if we speak up just as easily as they could kill us if we stay quiet. And I think that's something to remember, and it's something we know from history, which is, you can think that my silence will save me, but it won't.
Right.
And I just hope that's something people keep in mind always. And look, not everyone can be protesting on the front lines. That's just not everyone's place. And so I think as I've grown older, one thing I've understood is all the different kinds of advocacy that exist.
Yeah.
But to me, silence is never an option.
Right.
Because, Elie Wiesel said this, that there's no neutral.
Right.
Because to be neutral is just to side with the oppressor.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important lesson for adults to understand. And yes, young people sometimes act without foresight. That's kind of being a teenager.
Yeah.
And sometimes adults act with too much caution and myopia.
Yeah, I was putting together a book list kind of along those lines for one of our local magazines featuring, you know, internment, but really thinking about the ways, because people are always thinking, well, what can I do? And there's a children's book that talks about a little hummingbird and the tree's on fire and he just keeps going back and it's a tiny drop and the animals are like, are you crazy? What are you doing? And the moral is just kind of like we all do what we do within our own wheelhouse, and at least, you know, we're advocating in different ways. It's not always about protesting, but of course, I mean, it's a mixture. It has
Sometimes
to be
it is
everything,
protesting,
right?
but there's other things too, like, you know, I mean, one of the things I would tell my students, and I tell young people now, is voting is actually an important thing that you need to do. And I don't mean just voting in the presidential election, which you should do, but young people can register to vote even when they're 17 years old, as long as they're going to be 18 and before the next election. So that means, and I'm like, show up for everything. Like, you vote for your school board, you vote for your library board, you vote for your local mayor or city council, you vote for your state legislators. And I think that's so important because your vote in so many ways is your voice. And in America, honestly, not enough people vote.
Right.
And I mean, I remember being really amazed by something I saw during one of India's elections, because India is a massive country, right? And voting is over multiple days, and there's also, like, there's huge cities, but there's also remote villages. And I saw this image of a voting box, right, being carried across a river on the back of an elephant. And I was like, these people who are voting in that, they are really motivated to vote because they're like, okay, this is my chance.
Right.
And in India also, because there are relatively high rates of illiteracy, there's also ways to vote if you aren't able to read. And I think giving, I mean, not that I'm like espousing India's democracy as the best, because right now, highly problematic. But I just think that we sometimes don't consider how important voting really is. So that's like one thing. I also tell young people, like, even if you can't vote, you can show up at your school board meeting and your library board meeting. And you should be calling your state senators or your senators in DC or your congressmen. Like, these are all things where your voice is important. Like, I just randomly, at this coffee shop in Chicago, randomly ran into Pete Buttigieg. Now, he's not, he doesn't hold office right now, but he's an important voice in, you know, Democratic politics. And so I stopped him and I was like, hi. And I was like, but also while I have you, I'm just going to bend your ear. So now I'm going to give you a little lecture about what I think needs to happen. And I was like, look, this is, you've got to take the opportunities where they arise. And I also try to do a lot of advocacy work right now regarding book bans. I'm on the national leadership team of an organization called Authors Against Book Bans, because book bans, sadly, are pervasive across the United States. Iowa is a state where some districts have banned my book, at least one of them. And actually, Iowa was one of the first states that I heard about having one of my book bans, a district had banned Love, Hate, and Other Filters. And so that was like 3 years ago or more, maybe 3.5 years ago. And so I am just, book bans and censorship to me are so anti-freedom and anti-American. And that's why I was like, look, there's 1,000 things in our world right now that we need to stand up for and to voice, you know, to lend our voices to. But right now I'm like, we can't all do everything all at once. But I was like, books are something that I can talk about. And maybe that's a place where I have a voice, where I have a little bit of power, a little bit of a platform, and I can work with 5,000 of my author colleagues, and we can have press conferences to speak about the problems with book bans. We can go, I've spoken at school boards about book bans. We've sent letters to school boards, to legislatures. We have shown up to give testimony in various legislatures from literally from Colorado to Rhode Island. So being able to join voices together with my fellow authors is important to me, and that's like a kind of activism we can do because we're also stronger together. And when like thousands of us are sending a letter to a school board in this small town, they're like, okay, well, 2,000 authors just sent us this letter. Maybe we should listen.
I think it's also valid to point out that most people do not want censorship, and they
The
want
vast majority of Americans
they want intellectual
don't.
freedom.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think the freedom to read is the freedom to think.
yeah.
And the freedom to think is the foundation of a democracy.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously I'm preaching to a choir because
Yeah.
I'm in a library. But I think libraries are like lighthouses for democracy.
Yeah.
Libraries are like one of the greatest human inventions.
Yeah.
And they're thousands of years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
And so, like, we can think of like the Library of Alexandria, or like, you know, like libraries from the Ottoman Empire, or like far beyond, and
Yeah.
like the importance that, you know, ancient peoples had on preserving our written documents, or taking things that were passed through oral history and eventually writing them down. Like, that's why we can still read the Odyssey.
Sure.
I mean, you can tell I'm hyped up about this because
No.
it's so important.
Yeah.
So if anyone is listening to this, please go to your school board meetings, go to your library board meetings, and make
Yes.
sure, even if you're in a place where, like, you know, I live in Chicago, and Illinois actually passed one of the earliest laws to try to prevent book bans. But even there, I still am like telling my legislators, you need to fight harder for these freedoms.
Yeah.
Because they sometimes you need to push them in one direction, but other times you need to say, yeah, keep it up and get stronger.
Right. Yep. It's a fight that we're in.
Oh gosh, I really wish this wasn't such a fight, because like being a librarian right now is
Right.
so hard.
It's a fight. But you know, it just shows you how important those ideas are, that people are trying to quash them all the time.
Yeah.
Because you cannot kill these ideas.
Yeah.
Right? So we're fighting.
Yeah, I know. Being a librarian is really hard right now, but I'm like, I thank you for your service to
Yeah.
American democracy.
Thank you too. All right. So this is actually more about your writing process and being a writer. We often have preconceived ideas of what writers look like and how they operate. If you were going to dispel 2 myths and offer 2 pieces of wisdom to young writers, what would you say?
First, I want to say I never took a creative writing class. I don't have an MFA in creative writing, and I don't have a BFA in creative writing, so I never took one in college. I eventually, after I had graduated and was a teacher and had finished my master's degree and all these things, I took some classes for fun, like at my library, and other places that can offer them, and just because I like to write just as a hobby.
Yeah.
So I think one thing is, I think sometimes people get nervous, like, I can't be a writer or I can't be a poet because I haven't taken the class. That's not what my degree is in. And writing is a skill that you can develop. You can become a better writer by writing.
Right.
And I also like to tell kids, like, if you write, you're a writer, you know? Just like if you do math, you're a mathematician.
Sure.
When you're doing your science lab, you're a scientist. And I just want kids to understand that you can do it.
Yeah.
It takes some tenacity. It takes a lot of belief in yourself. But it's not like it's just, you know, it's not like some magical thing. I think a lot of times when we think of writers and like some of those stereotypes of writers, we have this very old image of like these, you know, like old white dudes writing, like Ernest Hemingway, or like these guys who also, you know, they weren't doing the million other things they would do. Like Hemingway had a bunch of kids. He wasn't taking care of the kids. He wasn't like feeding them. He wasn't making dinner. He wasn't like chauffeuring them to school or like carting them around.
Yeah. He was hanging out with his cats, I think.
Yeah, he was hanging out with his cats, like, I don't know, kind of being a jerk to a lot of people.
Right.
So, you know, I think, like, I always say that there's, like, you know, there's no expiration date on your dreams. Like, I didn't become a writer till I was older. Like, I had 2 full other careers before that. And it's a dream that I had later in life. And sometimes that is okay. You can do that. Like, maybe you're going down one path, you've opened that one door, and then you're like, I wonder if there's another door I can open. Maybe I'm going to try this one. So I don't know if that dispels any myths. I mean, I guess it's not, I think art and imagination should be accessible to everyone. Like, an imagination is something that we all have. That's like one of the coolest things about being a human. And I think the way that we can broaden our imaginations is by just being curious and asking questions. Like, I think people who ban books are deeply uncurious people, and that's like one of the biggest insults I can give you. And I'm like, what is wrong with you that you look at this giant, amazing world that we live in and look at all the things that humans have been able to do that are great and think, well, I want to do something really terrible.
Yeah.
And, you know, I told the kids today that as you grow older, a lot of times your imagination starts to get smaller. But having a big imagination is how we can imagine a more inclusive, better world.
Sure.
Like, you can imagine something that's possible instead of thinking, like, this is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would I like to imagine a world where there is no child hungry? 100%. And I actually believe we could accomplish that.
Yeah.
But you have to, like, imagine it in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
And so, like, keep being curious, figure out what those questions are that we need to ask that will get us to that goal of, like, no child hungry.
Yeah.
Or that will get us to the goal of no kid dying from measles.
Right.
Or that will get us to the, you know, the goal of having kids in even the poorest countries have access to vaccinations. So you know, get us to the goal, which is to have no more books censored.
Right. Let's get there. I think we have a little ways to go, but let's get
Well,
there.
we can get there.
We can get there.
I'm
We
a
imagine
hopeful
it.
person. That's why
Yeah.
I write for young adults. I believe in our ability to do good things. And I think sometimes it's important for us to remember that there are cool things that we've done. Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we see what sells in, like, media, and especially social media, is, like, all the terrible things. And there's a lot of terrible things right now. But there's a lot of also very cool humans doing awesome things.
Yeah. I think also just the power of books, the power of transformational stories, not even just in book form, but how our capacity to connect with other people, to realize similar goals and have us transcend. I just don't think that you can quash that. Because
No, I
once
don't
you've
think
had a taste of that life, you'd never want to go back.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I always think that stories are so interesting because humans have literally we've been telling each other stories since, like, our first days of language, essentially, right? We tell stories to explain the world to ourselves, but to also connect to other people, to say, I had this experience. Anyone else ever had this experience? Like, think of this moment, like, where, you know, like, I write for young people, and I think about how, like, okay, your first crush is so powerful, but then, like, oh my God, your first heartbreak is horrible. Yeah. And you feel, like, so lonely. No one has ever felt this bad before. Like, I am just, you know, overwhelmed by sadness because of this terrible heartbreak.
Yeah.
And then you can pick up a poem, or you can pick up a book, or you can find a story, and you're like, whoa, someone else felt that too. And they made it. Mm-hmm. They made it through. And it was crushing, and it was dramatic, and it was terrible. But that other person got through it. I'm not alone in this experience. So maybe that means I'm going to get through it too.
Right.
I just love that we can have that with stories.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Other authors and music often run through your books. And I worked in a bookshop as a kid, and I worked in a music shop, and I was kind of a snob with some of those things because the people around me were kind of like, you know.
Yeah.
So I also think that music is so powerful, especially in your formative years, like as a middle school and high school student.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you carry it with you into adulthood, right?
Yes, like I'm a Gen Xer. I'm like, okay, Gen X definitely had the best music.
Right? So I wondered, like, who were pivotal artists and authors when you were in middle and high school, and do you still kind of throw on some of those albums?
Yeah, so for authors, like, in middle school, I will say this everywhere, it was like Judy Blume.
Okay.
I mean, I'm probably one of 1 billion people who have that same opinion, but it's for a reason. Like, what Judy Blume has done, I mean, it changed, like, so many lives. And there's this amazing Judy Blume documentary, so if you can watch it, everyone please watch it. And you just realize what an incredible person she is. And she's still fighting for, you know, against book bans, because her books were being censored like 40, 50, 45 years ago.
Yeah.
And she's one of the authors against book bans and just did a press conference with us in Florida. And I'm like, that is very badass. I love that she's still doing this, you know? And so she's like one of those early authors that just really stuck in my head. And so I am very thankful for Judy Blume. And then I think, like, in terms of, like, music, so I was definitely a big, like, and still am, like, an alternative music fan. So, like, that was back in the days, like the 80s. So it was like, you know, like U2 and REM and 7 Seconds and, like, sort of like, you know, like some some punk, like, I don't know, like Jesus and Mary Chain, and like, I don't know, yeah, a lot of new wave, psychedelic furs. I actually still listen to it. I mean, you know, like the Pretty in Pink soundtrack? Killer soundtrack. It's so good. I still listen to it. Prince, I mean, my God. Purple Rain, like, that is an album that I was like, it transcends time. Everyone should listen to it. So, yeah, I mean, I was a kid during the early days of like I remember when, oh God, I'm really dating myself. I'm 150 years old. I remember when the Thriller video came out, and everybody in middle school, it was junior high then, everybody was like, did you watch it? Did you watch it? Like, it was like this social phenomenon. So I think it's because I existed in the early days of MTV, and like, I can remember like the first video I saw on MTV was Culture Club. So yeah, I mean, that stuff sticks with you.
There's a lot of good stuff though there. There's a lot of good stuff.
I mean, yes, I that's why I think that when I go to places, I still see kids with like band T-shirts from like bands from like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. I always tell my kid they have to know at least 5 songs to be able to wear the T-shirt. Because some of them you just go to the store and you see Rolling Stones and you put it on and you feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, some of your artists, like U2 and REM and all that, they're quite political, and I think, you know, that's why sometimes that, like those early seeds of, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure.
Revolution
like,
or something for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I think one of the first concerts I went to was an Amnesty International concert, which was the Conspiracy of Hope tour. Yes, it was amazing, actually. I mean, that was like when concert tickets were like $35.
Right.
I mean, at that show, it was like U2, the Police, because they reunited for like 2 shows, and that was one of them. Peter Gabriel was there, like Joan Baez. I mean, I was like, this is amazing first concert.
Cool. Yes.
But yes, I guess I always have sort of listened to kind of political music.
Yeah.
Billy Bragg.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I guess to me, art is political.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you can be like a massive Swiftie, and you can still understand like. You can just love her for like being pop music, but her stuff is also political. She writes about she has a lot of feminist themes in her work. And, you know, sometimes people are like, well, art shouldn't be political. I'm like, guys, all art is political.
Right.
And if you, as an artist, are saying, none of my art is political, that is actually a political choice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Go music and books.
Yeah.
Okay. Which character, if any, in your books most resembles you and why?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I feel like most of my characters are more like badass than me. So it's probably more like me, like wishing like I could be a little bit more like that. I'm probably, gosh, who am I most like? I mean, it's probably Maya from the first book. She's like just, I think when I was younger too, she was like, I was like her a little bit, because she's trying to find her space and her voice. And her aunt says to her, you know, sometimes just being who you are is a kind of revolution. Like, it's a kind of personal revolution, like finding your voice, taking the space that is yours. And so I guess probably as a young person, that would be kind of closest. But otherwise now I'm like the parent's age.
Sure.
So I'm the parent who's like, don't get yourself killed.
Yeah. Well, we all evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully.
In this book Won't Burn, you tackled book banning. We talked about this a little bit earlier on. Something obviously close to librarians' hearts. What advice can you give young people right now who want to stand up for intellectual freedom?
Okay, great. Yes, I love this question. So this book Won't Burn is all about that. It's about a story about a young woman who moves from Chicago to a smaller town in Illinois where books are being pulled. And the librarian's like, all these books are being pulled because the school board passed this new policy, and now there's hundreds of books that are getting removed from the shelves. And this kid's like, what? Wait, because she's like the library kid. Like, she's the one who would go to the library and just hang out like during her free period, or like before school or after school or whatever. And she's like, why is someone else telling me? Why is some other parent telling me what to read? I'm not their kid.
Right.
And so she starts, and this is just literally inspired by things that actual kids are doing. So she starts a banned book club, and they're forbidden from meeting on school property. So she finds a place that's not school property. She goes to a school board meeting, also inspired by actual kids. Like, I spoke at a school board meeting in Michigan one of the best things about that, 2 of my books were being removed from shelves there, Internment and Hollow Fires. So I went at the invitation of a librarian and English teacher to speak at that school board meeting, but the coolest person who spoke there was a high school senior. And she stood in front of that school board and was like, it is embarrassing for you that I should be here asking you to let me read books.
Right.
She's like, you're the school board. Isn't it your job to get books for me instead of pulling them away?
Right.
And she's like, why don't you trust that our librarians actually can do the job that you hired them to do? And I loved that. And what was amazing about that is every one of the school board members were being shamed by this young woman. And she was so courageous and ballsy. And I knew that they were being shamed because not one of them looked her in the eye when she spoke. And she is like 20 feet away from them.
Yeah.
They're all looking down, like, I don't know, doodling or whatever they were doing. And I was like, I love this kid. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to be writing about all the things that kids can do. So kids can absolutely, if they are able to vote in your school board and library board meetings. 100% show up at those school board and library board meetings. Because mostly the people who show up are the people who are very vocally mad about some book existing. And they're there to complain about it. Show up in force. Maybe you're not able to speak because you're too nervous to speak, but maybe someone else in your group is going to. Remember what we said before about everyone kind of has a role? Maybe it's just like you're showing up because strength in numbers. If like 10 high school kids showed up at a school board meeting, I think that would be pretty unprecedented. And you know what? All your school board members and your library board members are elected officials. They're public officials. And there are public ways to access them, whether it's through email or phone numbers. And I'm like, light up the phones. You do not have to be a voter to tell them what you want in your community. So I'm a big fan of showing up and shaming people if necessary. So you can do all those. I just think there's so much action that you can do in your community. And like writing for your school newspaper. I mean, in Hollow Fires, the main character is the editor of her school newspaper. And I was the editor of my school newspaper. And I published an editorial that my administration didn't really like. And she does the same thing. And I'm like, you know what? Yes, your admin has some control over your school newspapers, but a lot of times you have the power to speak out against things that you think are wrong in your district. I spoke to some kids who had read Internment in their class, and part of their project to end the reading was, what's something that you want to change and how can we change it? And one group was like, we want to change the fact that there's not recycling at our school. Now, you're like, okay, well, that's just some small thing. It's not like I'm fighting for my life. But you know what? That's actually a change. They got recycling into their school. They got bins in every classroom. And they did that by petitioning, going to the principal, going to the superintendent, and going to the school board. I mean, how cool is that?
Those are all translatable skills, too, because once you've done it once, you're able to scale up and replicate it again.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, like, I know sometimes it can be intimidating to speak to like an elected official. But I just want to remind everyone that they are public servants.
Working for us.
They work for us. We literally pay their salaries, or your parents or whoever is paying it, taxes is paying their salary. And do not be intimidated by them. Like, I don't want to give them a moment of peace. I was like, you work for me, do the job right.
We have a local business in town called Raygun, and they always print out these pithy political things, and there's a postcard that says, "Dear elected official, this is from your boss." And you know, I mean,
I can see how young people could be intimidated by it, but I always think of this young woman who stood up in front of those school board members and was like telling them. I was like, good for her.
Good. All right, we're winding down. So in your book, Internment, there's a quote: "If you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything." When young people ask you what you're standing up for right now, what do you say?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm standing up for democracy. I like to say that I'm standing up for the freedom of speech, and also for, I mean, with the stories I write, and just, I guess, with living my life, I believe I'm standing up for the kind of America that we should be living in, which is an inclusive country where everyone is at home. Like, there are, in my mind, like I hate the term illegal referring to human beings, because this is stolen land. No one is illegal on stolen land. And I just want us to believe that America is this massive song and we all get to sing as part of that chorus.
Yeah.
Because we all are Americans. Americans aren't just one certain small group of people. And so I think by just telling our stories and, you know, being unapologetically ourselves, owning our identities, we can make this the democracy we want it to be. Like right now, it feels like an uphill battle,
Right.
but it's all of us pushing together.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more of us. And so there's more of us who believe, for example, that we shouldn't be censoring books.
Yeah.
There's more of us who believe in like these basic freedoms.
Right.
The freedom just to live, to exist as we are.
Education, healthcare,
Yeah.
the environment.
I mean, but also like no one, like, you know, like I feel right now like so many of my queer and trans friends are under attack.
Yeah.
And their books are under attack. And like their books are being called all these terrible names and they're being called dangerous. And I'm like, if you want to protect kids, you could ban guns because books aren't walking into a school and shooting people. So I just really think that people should be called out when they're saying like, we're doing this to protect kids. No, if you were protecting kids, you would be actually banning things that could hurt them, like a shooter walking in with a gun that they have acquired legally and without needing to have any background check.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think, yeah, I guess I believe, I mean, I believe in freedom and like the democracy that we're supposed to have, not the one that some people want to turn us into.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think we're going to be done because I want to end on that, and I was going to ask you about your new book, but I think that's a good way.
Okay.
That's a good place for us to stop.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for
Yeah.
chatting.
Thank you so much.
Of course.